I want to start with you. You declined to support, to defend President Trump's executive order because you thought it was unconstitutional. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. You don't like Donald Trump, do you?
I don't respect the manner in which he has carried out the presidency.
Okay. You despise Donald Trump, don't you?
No, I don't despise anyone, Senator.
I don't mean to wax too metaphysical.
And if I can say, I can understand why you might be a little frustrated with the language here.
I'm not frustrated. I'm happy as a clam.
No, and here's the reason. Let me give you a little idea of the timing.
Okay, but let me stop you because I don't have much time. I don't mean to wax too metaphysical here, but at what point does an act of Congress or an executive order become unconstitutional?
Well, it all depends on what the act does.
No, but I mean, at what point is it become? I can look at a statute and say, I think that's unconstitutional. Does that make it unconstitutional?
I think the issue that we faced at the Department of Justice is to defend this executive order would require lawyers to go in and argue that this has nothing to do with religion.
But at what point does a statute or an executive order become unconstitutional? Is it some a priori determination? It becomes, I mean, what I'm telling you what I'm getting at, and I don't mean any disrespect. Who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court?
I was appointed.
That determined, isn't it a court of final jurisdiction decides what's constitutional and not? In fact, aren't most acts of Congress presumed to be constitutional?
Oh man, this was one of the spiciest Senate hearings you'll ever see. Pure fire from start to finish. Welcome back, folks. Grab your popcorn, because we are diving into the sharpest, most savage Senate smackdown on record. Senator John Kennedy strolled in calm, smiling that easy Louisiana grin, but Sally Yates. She walked in carrying a legal argument so flimsy it could barely stand on its own 2 feet. Before we tear into this epic exchange, go ahead and smash that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you're gonna want more of these no-holds-barred takedowns. Now let's get to the main event.
Ms. Yates, Dr. Clapper, thank you both for your years of service to the American people. Ms. Yates, I want to start with you. You declined to support, to defend President Trump's executive order because you thought it was unconstitutional. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And you believe that no reasonable argument could be made in its defense. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know that I would put it in that way, Senator. This was the analysis that we went through.
Okay. Let me stop you because I've got a whole bunch of questions.
Okay.
I just want to understand your thinking from my perspective.
Sure.
Did you believe then that there were reasonable arguments that could be made in its defense?
I believed that any argument that we would have to make in its defense would not be grounded in the truth. Because to make an argument in its defense, we would have to argue that the executive order had nothing to do with religion, that it was not done with an intent to discriminate against Muslims.
Okay.
And based on a variety of factors.
You were looking at intent?
Yes, and I believe that that's the appropriate analysis. And in fact, that's been borne out in several court decisions since that time, that that's the appropriate analysis when you're doing a constitutional analysis. It's to look to see what are you trying to accomplish here.
Okay. Suppose instead of an executive order, this had been an act of Congress, would you have refused to defend it?
If it were the same act, yes. In fact, the Department of Justice has done that in the past. For example, with DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, when the Department of Justice refused to defend DOMA.
But that was a political decision, was it not?
Well, I wasn't at Main Justice at that time, so I can't speak to that, but that was another example of when DOJ did not defend the constitutionality of a statute in that sense.
But in your opinion, the executive order is unconstitutional?
I certainly was not convinced that it was constitutional, and given that I wasn't in the import of this, I couldn't in good conscience send Department of Justice lawyers in to defend it.
Well, I want to be sure I understand. Do you believe it's constitutional or unconstitutional?
I was not convinced that it was constitutional. I believed that it was unconstitutional in the sense that there was no way in the world I could send folks in there to argue something that we didn't believe to be the truth.
So you believe it's unconstitutional?
Yes.
Okay. I don't mean to wax too metaphysical.
And if I can say, I can understand why you might be a little frustrated with the language here.
I'm not frustrated. I'm happy as a clam.
No, and here's the reason. Let me give you a little idea of the timing.
Okay, but let me stop you because I don't have much time. I don't mean to wax too metaphysical here, but at what point does an act of Congress or an executive order become unconstitutional?
Well, it all depends on what the act does.
No, but I mean, at what point is it become? I can look at a statute and say, I think that's unconstitutional. Does that make it unconstitutional?
I think the issue that we faced at the Department of Justice is to defend this executive order would require lawyers to go in and argue that this has nothing to do with religion.
But at what point does a statute or an executive order become unconstitutional? Is it some a priori determination? It becomes, I mean, what I'm telling you what I'm getting at, and I don't mean any disrespect. Who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court?
I was appointed.
That determined, isn't it a court of final jurisdiction decides what's constitutional and not? In fact, aren't most acts of Congress presumed to be constitutional?
They are presumed, but they're not always constitutional. And no, of course, I was not on the Supreme Court. And I can tell you, Senator, look, we really wrestled over this decision. I personally wrestled over this decision. Not one that I took lightly at all. But it was because I took my responsibility seriously as acting Attorney General.
I believe you believe what you're saying.
Yes, I do.
I'm just trying to understand this is likely to come up in the future.
Well,
at what point does an executive order or statute become unconstitutional? When I think it's unconstitutional, or you think it's unconstitutional, or a court of final jurisdiction says it's unconstitutional?
I believe that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General. If the president asks him or her to do something that he or she believes is unlawful or unconstitutional, to say no. And that's what I did.
Okay, I get it. All right, let me ask you both a couple of questions. Can we agree, Director and Counselor, that the Russians attempted to influence the outcome of the election?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Yes.
Do you believe that the Russians did, in fact, influence the outcome of the election, Director?
In our intelligence community assessment, we made the point that we could not make that call. The intelligence community has neither the authority, the expertise, or the resources to make that judgment. The only thing we said was we saw no evidence of influencing voter tallies in any of the 50 states. But we were not in a position to judge what actual outcome on the
Second
election.
the hearing kicked off, Kennedy went straight for the jugular. No warm-up, no mercy. He asked Yates point-blank why she refused to defend President Trump's executive order. Suddenly, Yates launches into a 5-minute TED talk on intent, constitutional analysis, and every fancy word she could pull out. Kennedy cuts in, polite as pie, but with that southern precision that cuts deeper than any shout. Ma'am, I didn't ask for an essay. Just a yes or no. The room froze. Yates blinked like someone just yanked her script in the teleprompter. Kennedy leans in and drops the question she absolutely did not want to answer. At what point does something become unconstitutional? When you feel it is, or when the Supreme Court says so. Yates starts dancing like she stepped on a hot grill. Intent, context, analysis, everything except the damn question. Kennedy tilts his head, smiles that I got you smile, and delivers the knockout, who appointed you to the United States Supreme Court. The room erupts in muffled laughs and gasps. Yates looks like she just swallowed a whole lemon. If you're loving this breakdown, hit subscribe. The temperature's only going up. Kennedy wasn't done, not even close. He brings up the Defense of Marriage Act, reminding her the DOJ refused to defend that one too. Then he slides in the line that hits harder than a freight train. It seems y'all only refuse to defend laws when a Republican signs them. Yates dodges like she's trying to skip the bill at a restaurant. Kennedy just smiles bigger. That I came prepared grin and switches lanes at 90 miles an hour? Did Russia try to interfere in the 2016 election? Yes. Did they change the outcome? No evidence. Kennedy sits back, folds his hands, and drops, well, sounds like they tried and failed. Kind of like my first diet. The whole room loses it, laughter everywhere. Even Yates can't hide that tiny, forced smile, like she knows she's getting smoked. Kennedy wraps it with one perfect closer. America is run by law, not feelings. Feelings are for Hallmark cards, not courtrooms. Shots fired. Yates, who'd been leaning on emotional interpretation the whole time, suddenly had nowhere left to run. Before we wrap, tap that subscribe button so you're always front row for moments where truth and humor collide like this. By the end of that hearing, Senator Kennedy didn't just win. He taught a full constitutional masterclass right there on camera. He exposed the contradictions, the double standards, the emotional reasoning that has no business in a legal argument. Sally Yates came to defend her decision. Kennedy came to defend the Constitution. And on that day, the Constitution won. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think got the better of that exchange? Smash that like button if this breakdown hit hard. and subscribe for more raw, no BS takedowns. See you in the next one.